What's going on, everyone? Thanks for stopping back by the channel. Really appreciate you being here. If you're a returning viewer, thanks for coming back by. If this is your first time viewing the channel, welcome. Hope you enjoy the content. Be sure to check out some of the other videos. They'll help get caught up to speed. We're continuing on our journey of the Academy, specifically the first week with it. And up to this point, we've covered the benefits that the clerk talked to us about, the union, getting sized for uniforms. There wasn't really a whole lot that was memorable during the first week of the Academy. The one that really did stand out was on Friday when we had a class from Sergeant Battles about offender terminology, lingo, and language that they're going to use. Now, every industry has its own brand of insider jargon, acronyms, language that's specific to within the company, and TDCJ is no stranger to that. So I've compiled a list of, to me, what I felt were the 10 most used and the ones that were important to me. So this is going to be a pretty quick video. We'll go ahead and jump right into that terminology. The very first one, Gen Pop, also short for general population. Gen Pop was where the majority of your fenders, that was the status that they were housed in. Usually that was where they were all grouped together and had more of the freedoms that could be afforded to them within the prison. Number two, boss. Offenders, inmates, they always called corrections officers boss, boss man, or not too often, officer. You'd hear off in the distance, "Hey, boss man! Hey, boss! Come on over here, boss! Look at me, boss!" Okay. That was the inmate / offender's way of getting our attention and wanting to have a conversation with us. So, correction officer equals boss. Number three coming in, rec. One of the offender's most favorite thing in the world, rec. Short for recreation. Rec could be done in a couple of different ways. They would either go outside their housing unit, out on the yard. That's usually where there was exercise equipment, a walking area, afforded them a little bit more freedom than inside the building. Other forms of rec could be inside of a caged particular area for those who didn't have a whole lot of freedom of movements. And just a time for them to get out and do whatever it is they needed to do. Exercise, conduct offender business. Offender business was, well, specific to business that the offender was going to do. I could do a whole video on that. In fact, we'll probably get into that another time from there. Number four coming up on the list, trafficking and trading. Trafficking and trading was the process of inmates giving things to each other. You may think, well, what's the big deal with that? Offenders were not allowed to give things to each other. Corrections officers were not allowed to give things to offenders except for what they were supposed to have. Chow, medicine, legal documents. They weren't supposed to be given anything extra. I could not give this offender what I wouldn't give this other offender. Something as simple as I give this offender a pen. Unless I'm ready to give out 83 more pens to everybody in the housing area, can't do it. It's trafficking and trading. It's a way for offenders to extort each other and for a way for them to extort said corrections officer. So, trafficking and trading, big no-go, but also a huge deal. Number five on the list, kite. Kite kind of comes in with trafficking and trading. A kite could be anything as simple as a message. I live in this housing unit. This individual lives in this housing unit. I need to tell this individual something. I verbally say something to this individual on the yard. They pass it to another individual who gets it back to this individual inside the housing unit. That's just one simple way of a verbal kite. Other ones could be in the form of paper notes or items purchased from commissary or anything really that an offender needed to get from one to another. Kite was typically an illegal form of trade However, it was done all the time. Number 6, we'll talk about the second form of housing, ad-seg, administrative segregation. Ad-seg was used for those offenders who couldn't be housed in general population. One of the main reasons, they had some form of affiliation with a gang, also called in Texas a security threat group, an STG. Either they had verbally admitted they were part of said organization, they had some kind of ink or tattooing on a part of their body that identified them, or another individual had pointed them out. Other individuals, they needed to be segregated because, for whatever reason, their medical history, psychologically, or they're just too violent to be with a group of individuals, they had to be housed separately in segregation. Segregation inmates were typically in a one-person cell, stayed in the cell for around 21 to 22 hours a day. They were let out for day room privileges and for shower. Other than that, everything took place in their cells. Medications, law library, chaplain visits, food, everything was done in their cells. When I worked at TDCJ, I was predominantly assigned to ad-seg. We'll get into a whole nother video on those experiences. Number 7 making this list, killing. Now, disclaimer for this, I'm sorry about that. Because this is based around prison, there are going to be some offensive terms that are going to be used. I'm going to do my best to steer clear of profanity. However, this being prison-based, there are going to be offensive terms in it. Killing was a term used for offenders who would masturbate toward female officers or male officers. They would try to do it either in secrecy or hiding. If they were trying to do their business in front of everybody, no go. That was a straight up charge. I don't remember what the official name of the charge was, but it was one of the higher up offenses, just about next to assault. So, if you hear that an individual is killing on another individual, or an individual is wearing a kill shield, i.e., a vest, a smock, an apron, something to distort their physical presence, that was to stop any kind of masturbatory practices that inmates were doing. Next up on the list, number 8, chunking. Chunking was the process of an offender taking a cup, a jar, some kind of a container, and filling it with any kind of volatile substance. Urine, fecal matter, blood, any kind of bodily fluid. You can use your imagination and imagine what other bodily fluids are, mixed with anything else. Nasty food, broken up glass. Contents would be all mixed into this container, and the contents of this container would be thrown on an individual, either another offender that this individual didn't like, or an officer that had somehow upset this offender, and they wanted to get these bodily fluids on there. Not only could it be stinky and annoying, the offender could also have some kind of a communicable disease, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, something. They mix their bodily fluids in with this, throw that onto another individual. We're looking at a pretty heinous act that they're trying to commit there. It did happen all the time. Yes, I was exposed to it. No, it was not pleasant. That's what we're talking about with chunking. Number 9, check-in. Check-in was the process for an individual, usually an inmate, an offender, to go to a corrections officer and request protection. They would do this for a number of reasons. Either they were going to be assaulted by their cellmate, they didn't like the particular housing unit that they were in, they wanted to get to another unit because they knew that an individual they wanted to be around could particularly be in there, or they were just having a bad day and just didn't want to be around general population anymore. So to check in was for a fender to come to a CO and request protection. That individual was then supposed to be removed from whatever housing unit they were in, placed into protective custody, and then it would go on from there. So you'll often hear me use the term check-in. Lastly, number 10 on the list, beam tool. Beam tool was a metal rod that had 2 prongs on it. These prongs would be pushed into the food slot. Food slot would be an opening in the door, a metal flap that would open up. The beam tool would be inserted. You would depress down on it, pressing the prongs up. They would then lift up the metal prong that was holding the slot in place, and then you could pull it open. Beam tool was a metal rod that we used to open and close the food slots to pass anything to offenders who were in any kind of segregation type status. Folks, that's going to cover the top 10 terminologies that I found to be the most important with what I did. There's so many more. Could make so much content on all the other terms. These are the ones that stand out the most. I really hope that you enjoyed today's content. If you did, let me know. Tell me what you did or what you didn't like. And I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Thanks for tuning in.